On a hot August night in 1947, a thin man in an immaculate white sherwani leans over a trembling map of the Indian subcontinent. Outside, the city roars with fireworks and gunfire. Inside, his hand shakes as he draws an invisible line in the air, a border that doesn't yet exist. Trains are already beginning to move toward that unborn frontier, packed with families who don't know that some of those trains will arrive at their destinations filled only with bodies. In Delhi, his greatest rival, Mohandas Gandhi, walks barefoot through riot-torn streets, pleading for peace. Their visions for India could not be more opposite. Their time to prove themselves could not be shorter. The man at the table, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, has just become the founder of a new country, Pakistan. He looks like a monument carved out of marble, tall, aristocratic, remote. But inside, his lungs are failing. Tuberculosis is eating him alive. Almost no one knows it, but from this moment he has barely a year to live. He has won, he has also run out of time. To understand how a sickly child from a dusty port city became the architect of a partition that would change history, how a young lawyer nicknamed the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity became Gandhi's most implacable opponent, we have to go back, long before the map, long before the border, long before the ticking clock began to roar in his chest. We have to go back to Karachi, 1876. Picture a narrow street in a bustling colonial port. The smell of salt from the Arabian Sea mixes with dust, spices, and coal smoke from British steamships. Horse-drawn carts creak past small shops. Above one of those shops, in a house crowded with siblings, a baby boy cries. He is given a long name, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. No one, not his parents, not the neighbors, not the British officials in their stiff uniforms, looks at this fragile baby and thinks, one day this child will redraw the map of the world. His father, Jinnah Punja, is a merchant, ambitious but always one bad season away from disaster. The family belongs to a small Gujarati trading community, straddling languages, cultures, and faiths. They are Muslims in a predominantly Hindu region, Indians under foreign rule, traders in an empire that prefers them as clerks, not competitors. This is Jinnah's first lesson. Identity is complicated, and power rarely belongs to people like his family. You can almost hear the sounds of that childhood, the call to prayer drifting through the heat, the cries of hawkers, the clanging of shipmasts in Karachi's harbor. A lanky boy with sharp eyes stands at the edge of the docks, watching British officers stride across the pier in polished boots, checking their watches, barking orders in English. He doesn't understand the words yet, but he understands the posture, authority, certainty, command. And somewhere inside that boy, an idea begins to form. Not yet a dream of a country, not even a dream of politics, but a hunger to stand like that, to speak and be obeyed. At school, he is restless, intelligent, unpredictable. He is not the kind of earnest, humble boy elders brag about in family gatherings. He skips classes when they bore him, he argues with teachers, he challenges older boys with questions that sound almost like cross-examination. One day he watches a British magistrate preside over a court case. The room is hot, suffocating, but the judge sits cool and distant, as if wrapped in an invisible cloak of authority. Witnesses stammer, lawyers sweat, and with a few precise words the judge decides the fate of grown men. For Jinnah, it is like watching magic. The spell is not the law itself, it's the language, the clarity, the power of a well-constructed argument. In that colonial courtroom, under the gaze of a foreign flag, a teenage boy discovers his first love, not politics, not patriotism, but the merciless elegance of law. There is a problem. His family doesn't have the money or the connections for grand dreams. His father wants him to help in the business, to be practical, to survive. But Jinnah is already impatient with just surviving. And then, like in all great stories, an unexpected door opens. A wealthy family friend notices the boy's sharp intelligence and burning ambition. There are murmurs about opportunity in England, legal studies, perhaps a career as a barrister. Europe is a mythic place to most families in Karachi, an expensive dream. But Jinnah is relentless. He pushes, persuades, insists. Finally, against their fears, his parents agree. They gather what they can. The teenager who has barely seen beyond the bustling lanes of Karachi is put on a ship to London, the beating heart of the very empire that rules his homeland. He is 16 years old. Imagine that voyage, weeks at sea. The shoreline of India shrinks into a blur, then vanishes. On deck at night, alone, Jinnah stares at the dark waves and the indifferent stars above, clutching a small suitcase and a destiny no one can yet see. When he steps onto the foggy streets of London, it is like landing on another planet. Horse-drawn carriages, gas lamps, gentlemen in top hats and women in elaborate gowns, theaters and law courts, clubs that Indians are not allowed to enter. Poverty and wealth collide at every corner. He enrolls at Lincoln's Inn to study law. The walls are lined with the portraits of famous jurists. Centuries of English legal power stare down at this thin, determined colonial student. He studies obsessively. He imitates the precision of British lawyers, their cold, clipped sentences, their self-control. He begins to reshape himself. Slowly, the boy from Karachi disappears. In his place emerges a young man who speaks English with almost no accent, wears flawlessly tailored suits, and moves with a reserved, aristocratic confidence. He is Muslim, Indian, colonial, but you would never know it from the way he carries himself through the gray streets of London. At night, he goes to the theater, captivated by Shakespeare and by the power of speech to move crowds to tears or laughter. He watches actors command silence with a single gesture, a single word. He is not just learning the law, he is learning performance, presence, timing. If politics is a stage, then London is quietly giving Jinnah all the tools he will one day use to remake history. But there is a twist. While he is in London, he receives devastating news. His mother has died. The letter arrives late. By the time he reads it, she is already buried. The boy who never wept in public stands alone in his rented room, staring at a piece of paper that tells him that a part of his past is gone forever. There is another blow. His father's business is struggling under debts. The money sent for his education is a sacrifice, a gamble that may ruin the family if it fails. The clock is now ticking, not on his health, but on his duty. He cannot afford to fail. He cannot afford to drift. He passes his bar exams faster than expected. He could stay in England, perhaps, find a safe position, vanish into the anonymous ranks of colonial lawyers. Instead, he makes a decision that will haunt and define him. He returns to India, Bombay, 1890s. It is louder, richer, more ruthless than Karachi. Grand buildings rise next to slums. British officials speed past in carriages. Indian workers sweat on docks and in factories. It is a city of collisions, cultures, classes, ambitions. In this chaotic arena, a 20-something Jinnah opens his legal practice. At first, clients don't flock to him. He is young, unproven, almost too polished. But then slowly his reputation starts to spread. He is meticulous. He memorizes case files, anticipates arguments, dissects evidence like a surgeon. In court, his voice is calm, low, almost icy. He never shouts. He never pleads. He simply lays out facts with such relentless logic that even hostile judges hesitate. One British lawyer watches him in action and mutters, half grudging, half impressed, "If you brief Jinnah, you have briefed the court itself. This is not the roar of a mass leader. This is the rise of a craftsman, a master of words." Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, another drama is unfolding. India itself is stirring. The Indian National Congress, founded in 1885, mostly a polite forum of educated elites, begins to talk of rights, of representation, of self-government. It is tame by later standards, but radical for its time. The idea that Indians, Hindu, Muslim, Parsi, Sikh, could speak as one nation is intoxicating to some and terrifying to others. At first, Jinnah watches from a distance. He is not a revolutionary. He believes in constitutional methods, in negotiations, in careful reform. He admires the British legal system even as he resents their political rule. But slowly, almost against his own instincts, politics begins to pull him in. His entry is quiet, almost cautious. He attends Congress meetings, listens more than he speaks. He is drawn to Dadabhai Naoroji, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and other liberal leaders who believe India can earn its freedom step by step, through persuasion, reason, law. It is here that Jinnah first earns a title that now sounds almost impossible. He becomes known as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, a Muslim barrister, impeccably Western in dress and manner, standing in halls filled mostly with Hindu leaders, arguing not for separation but for partnership. He insists that India's future must be shared, that no community can dominate another, that the British must gradually yield power to a united Indian people. In the background, another organization is forming, the All India Muslim League. At first, Jinnah keeps his distance. He fears that a party built solely on religious identity will divide, not strengthen, Indians in their struggle against empire. He joins the Congress, not the League. This is one of the great twists of his life. The man who will later carve out a separate Muslim homeland begins his political journey, fighting for a united India. His career now surges on two tracks. In court, he is becoming one of the subcontinent's most successful barristers, earning fees that allow him a life of comfort and elegance. A grand house, fine suits, a personal car in a city where most people walk barefoot. In politics, he is rising through Congress ranks, negotiating between Hindus and Muslims, insisting on fairness and balance. And then, like all great stories, love crashes through the carefully arranged script. Her name is Ratanbai Pati, known as Ruddy. She is the daughter of a wealthy Parsi industrialist, one of Bombay's most prominent families, thoroughly westernized, fabulously rich. She is also fiery, intelligent, and rebellious. Jinnah is over 40 when they truly meet. She is in her teens. In another time, in another culture, they might have brushed past each other at a theater, exchanged polite nods, and gone on with their separate lives. Instead, they become fascinated with each other. He is reserved, controlled, almost cold in public. She is expressive, emotional, draped in flowing saris and shimmering jewels. He is a Muslim, she is Parsi. Society is against them. Her father is furious, the newspapers whisper. The elites of Bombay shake their heads in disapproval. Ruddy converts to Islam and marries him in 1918. The city is scandalized. Picture that wedding. A small ceremony, the air thick with tension and gossip. Somewhere far off, the British Raj hums along, indifferent to this storm of private rebellion. But in Jinnah's life, fault lines are opening. The careful balance he crafted between identities, colonial and Indian, Muslim and nationalist, now cracks at home as well. His relationship with Ruddy will bring him happiness, pain, and ultimately heartbreak. But in these early years, we see glimpses of a different Jinnah, softer, smiling, reading poetry, discussing revolution, rapping. His cool precision around a fierce romantic woman who believes in causes more openly than he ever will. As his personal life defies convention, the political landscape explodes. A small, slight lawyer who has made his name in South Africa returns to India, wrapped in a simple dhoti and shawl, speaking of non-violence and spinning wheels. His name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Where Jinnah is elegance and logic, Gandhi is asceticism and faith. Where Jinnah wears Savile Row suits, Gandhi dresses like the poorest peasant. Where Jinnah believes in slow, calculated constitutional reform, Gandhi believes in mass awakening, civil disobedience, the moral power of suffering. At first, Jinnah is cautious but respectful. Gandhi's methods puzzle him, even disturb him. He worries that mixing religion with politics, filling the streets with emotional crowds, will tear the fragile fabric of Hindu-Muslim cooperation. But he cannot ignore the sheer force of Gandhi's appeal. Gandhi speaks to the villages, Jinnah speaks to the courts. The rivalry that will one day remake the map starts not with shouted insults or dramatic showdowns, but with an unease, a clash of styles, a disagreement about how to fight the same enemy. The British, of course, are watching all of this with interest. A divided Indian leadership is easier to manage. While Congress debates and the Muslim League slowly grows, the empire tightens its economic grip, recruits Indian soldiers to fight. Its wars and offers small reforms designed to calm, not free, the restless land. By 1919, the simmering tensions boil over. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Amritsar shocks India. British troops fire on unarmed men, women, and children gathered in a walled garden. Hundreds are killed, perhaps more. The official reports downplay the bloodshed. The ground of that garden soaks in silence. For Jinnah, who believes in British justice even while opposing British rule, this is a turning point. He resigns from an advisory council position in protest. His private faith in the fairness of the empire is badly wounded. Gandhi responds with a call for non-cooperation. Boycott British goods, British institutions, British honors. Turn away from the system, he says. Refuse to lend it legitimacy. Jinnah listens and recoils. He believes in law, in councils, in negotiations. He fears that mass movements can become mobs, that passion can engulf reason, that once unleashed, religious sentiment will not obey anyone's control. To him, Gandhi's plan is not just risky, it is reckless. In December 1920, at a crucial Congress session in Nagpur, the conflict comes to a head. The hall is crowded, noisy, charged with hope and anger. Delegates shout slogans, some wearing Gandhi's simple homespun cloth, others in Western suits. On the stage, Gandhi urges adoption of his program of non-cooperation. Jinnah rises to speak. He is dressed as always in a tailored suit. No khadi, no dramatics. His speech is measured, legalistic, precise. He warns against abandoning constitutional methods. He argues that mixing religion so openly with politics will lead to disaster. He cautions that emotional mass movements are easily misdirected. The crowd is not with him. They are swept up in the new mood, the new leader, the new language of sacrifice and spinning wheels. Jinnah's cool reason sounds to many ears like fear, like elitism, like a man out of touch with the country's heartbeat. He is heckled. Some delegates shout him down. The ambassador of unity, the man who once bridged communities, now finds himself isolated in his own party. Finally, in a moment that will change the trajectory of his life, Jinnah walks out. He leaves the Congress session, his footsteps echoing in the dust, away from Gandhi's rising tide and towards an uncertain future. Behind him, the hall erupts in applause for the program he opposed. Ahead of him lies a path that will lead him, step by step, from lonely barrister to the Quaid-e-Azam of a new nation. He does not yet know it. He does not know that the rivalry just ignited in that hall will turn him into Gandhi's opposite number, that the clock already ticking in his frail body will one day beat in time with the countdown to partition. All he knows in that moment is that he has chosen principle over popularity, law over passion, solitude over applause. And somewhere in the crowded, divided subcontinent, destiny quietly changes course. Outside the Nagpur hall, the December air feels cooler, sharper, as if the whole world has turned its back and shut the doors. The noise inside, slogans, applause, Gandhi's name chanted like a prayer, fades into a dull, distant roar. Muhammad Ali Jinnah steps into the courtyard, straightens his tie, and lights a cigarette with steady hands. He has just walked out of the Indian National Congress, the party he helped shape, the stage on which he rose. He doesn't slam the door. He closes it carefully. That is his style. No scenes, no dramatics. Just a clean break. But make no mistake, in that quiet step away from Gandhi's movement, he has just exiled himself from the center of Indian politics. For the first time in years, Jinnah is not walking towards something. He is walking into a void. In Bombay, his legal practice is at its peak. Clients queue for his time, judges respect him, British officials privately fear crossing him in court. His home is elegant, his suits immaculate, his fees astronomical. On paper, he has everything. In politics, he has almost nothing. The Congress is now Gandhi's arena, a place of spinning wheels, village prayers, mass arrests. The All India Muslim League, which Jinnah once dismissed as too loyal to the British and too focused on narrow interests, is weak, divided and derided as a club of landlords. He belongs fully to neither camp. At home, the fault lines widen. His marriage to Rati, that dazzling act of rebellion, begins to fray under the pressure of his work, his reserve, her sensitivity. She wants emotional warmth, revolution, poetry. He brings discipline, long hours, late nights, and a growing silence. He is now a man suspended between worlds, politically homeless, emotionally exhausted, personally isolated. The ambassador of unity stands on an island of his own making, and then the world itself begins to split. The 1920s bleed into the 1930s. Empire tumble, economy crash, new ideologies rise. In Europe, fascism stalks the streets. In India, distrust quietly spreads between communities that once shared the same rallies, the same platforms, the same prison cells. The British, playing one side against another with cold skill, introduced constitutional reforms, carefully measured doses of power, designed never to threaten real control. Separate electorates, reserved seats, communal awards, words that sound technical on paper but land like sharp stones in the fragile waters of Hindu-Muslim relations. Jinnah watches all this with lawyerly clarity and increasing alarm. He had warned that mixing religion with politics, Gandhi's Hindu idioms, the Khilafat movement's Islamic surge, would tear the country apart. Now he sees his fears materializing. Suspicion grows. Minor incidents turn into riots. Committees and conferences fail to bridge the widening gap. He works, he travels, he negotiates, But the center that once held his vision of a united constitutional India is collapsing, and then life hits him where no argument can defend. Ruddy falls ill. Her fiery spirit, once so luminous, dims under the strain of their troubled marriage and her own fragile health. There are scenes, arguments, silences that drag on like winters. Friends see her drifting away from him, emotionally and physically. On a February day in 1929, in a Bombay hospital room, she dies at the age of 29. He walks in, sees her body covered in white, and for a moment the public mask slips. At her funeral, this man famed for icy composure stands by the grave of the only woman he ever truly allowed into his carefully guarded life and breaks down, weeping uncontrollably. Those who witness it never forget. They have seen the iron melt. From that point on, something in him hardens permanently. The grief burrows deep, sealed off where even he refuses to look. He pours himself back into his work, his files, his arguments, building walls of paper and logic around a wound that never heals. His daughter, Dina, grows up mostly in the shadow of that silence. When, years later, she chooses to marry a Parsi man despite his objections, he will say one sentence that will echo through both their lives. She has made her choice, and I have made mine. Jinnah's private world shrinks to two constants: his sister Fatima, fiercely loyal and protective, and his own ambition, now stripped of illusions. Politically, the 1930s bring another humiliation. In 1930, at the Round Table conferences in London, leaders from India gather with British politicians to negotiate constitutional reforms. Princes, Hindu leaders, Muslim representatives, untouchables, spokesmen, an entire gallery of claimants to India's future sits around polished wooden tables under crystal chandeliers. Jinnah attends, argues, drafts proposals, dissects schemes. He speaks in the careful cadences of constitutional law, insisting on safeguards for Muslims within a united India, federal structures, fair representation. He talks, negotiates, drafts. Nothing substantial comes of it. Back in India, he finds himself overshadowed. Other Muslim leaders rise, some willing to accept British arrangements, others ready to bargain directly with the Congress. The League is fractured, regional elites pull in different directions, and the British, as always, prefer many weak claimants to one strong voice. In 1931, as Gandhi sails to London in his homespun cloth and shawl, the world's cameras follow him. He charms British audiences, meets the king in a loincloth, speaks of India's destitute millions. Newspapers gush, cartoonists sketch, crowds surround him. Jinnah, impeccably dressed, precise, sharp, moves through the same city almost as a shadow. One man embodies sacrifice, the other sophistication. In an era of mass politics, the poorer, half-naked lawyer from Gujarat looks more like the future than the aristocratic barrister from Karachi. The contrast could not be more brutal. Disgusted by the chaos and opportunism he sees in Indian politics, Jinnah does something unthinkable for a man of his drive. He steps away. In the early 1930s, he effectively retires to London. He buys a flat in West Hampstead, practices law at the Privy Council, walks the same gray streets where he once studied as a young man. To casual observers, it looks like surrender, a graceful exit into a comfortable foreign twilight. Imagine him there, alone in a quiet English apartment, rain ticking against the window, newspapers spread on the table, reports from India bleeding ink under his fingers. Congress is growing stronger. Gandhi, then Nehru, speak of complete independence. The Muslim League drifts, leaderless, quarrelsome. The British experiment with new constitutional schemes, drawing lines on maps and in law books that carve up electorates by religion, outweight provinces by population, and leave minorities forever uncertain whether they are adequately protected. It is in this apparent exile that a new role begins to crystallize. Back in India, Muslim politicians realize that without a figure of Jinnah's stature, his legal mind, his untainted reputation, his capacity to negotiate with both British and Congress, Muslim interests will be crushed between the millstones of imperial policy and Congress ambition. Delegation after delegation comes to London. Letters arrive. Appeals are made. Come back. Lead us. At first, he hesitates. He knows exactly how weak the League is, how dangerous the communal landscape has become, how bitter the rivalries are. To return is to jump back into a fire he has already been burned by. Then something shifts. Maybe it is the steady drumbeat of Congress's language, national this, national that, spoken in tones that to his ears increasingly sound Hindu rather than truly inclusive. Maybe it is the British insistence on designing systems that treat Muslims as a permanent minority to be given crumbs, not guarantees. Maybe it is the realization that, in the end, he cannot watch from London while his people's future is bargained over in rooms where they are either absent or weak. In 1934, he decides, he will return, not as a junior partner in Gandhi's Congress, not as an ornament in British councils. He will return as something else entirely. He lands in India to find chaos, but also opportunity. The Government of India. Act of 1935 promises provincial elections, greater self-government at the regional level, a chance to test strength in actual votes. For Congress, it is a springboard. For the Muslim League, it is a matter of survival. Either it becomes the main voice of Muslims, or it dissolves into irrelevance, leaving a vacuum others will fill. Jinnah throws himself into reorganizing the League with the same ruthless focus he once reserved for legal cases. He tours provinces, woos feudal landlords and urban professionals, negotiates with fractious local leaders, forges alliances with groups that only yesterday distrusted him. He is tireless, methodical, often harsh. He is not building a movement of saints, he is building a machine. The elections of 1937, when they come, are a cold shock. Congress sweeps the Hindu-majority provinces. The green flag of the League flies in far fewer places than Jinnah had hoped. In some Muslim-majority provinces, Punjab, Bengal, regional Muslim parties, not the League, dominate. The results are clear. The Congress can claim to represent all of India. The League cannot yet claim to represent all Muslims. Gandhi's followers form ministries in province after province. The tricolor rises over government buildings. Congress slogans fill the streets. Jinnah, who had once stood beside those leaders in the fight for reform, now stands outside the circle of power watching. But inside those new Congress ministries, choices are made that will change everything. Urdu and Hindi, cow protection and music before mosques, employment policies and local patronage, all the small levers of provincial power are pulled, sometimes clumsily, sometimes arrogantly, often with the blind spots of a party that believes it embodies the nation and does not see how it looks from the outside. To many Muslims, especially in provinces ruled by Congress, it begins to feel like their worst fear has been confirmed. Self-rule might mean not rule by all Indians, but rule by the Hindu majority. Jinnah seizes on this. In speeches, in resolutions, in carefully crafted letters, he hammers home one message. The Congress is not a national party, it is a Hindu party. Muslims, he insists, are not a mere minority to be managed. They are a separate nation with their own history, culture, and political destiny. The man who once fought to keep religion out of politics now uses the language of identity like a scalpel. Not because he has become a rabid fanatic, he remains personally secular, privately detached from ritual, but because he has concluded that in a system built on numbers, identity is the only shield Muslims have. In March 1940 in Lahore, that shield becomes a sword. On a vast field, under a hot sky, thousands gather under green flags. Delegates from across India's Muslim communities, from landlords polished in English to peasants in coarse cotton, stand shoulder to shoulder. The air buzzes with anticipation, rumor, and a new dangerous word: Pakistan. Jinnah rises to speak. He is older now, thinner, his face more gaunt, but in public he still looks indestructible. Precise suit, clipped sentences, calm authority. His voice carries across the field, cool and relentless. Hindus and Muslims, he says, belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, and literatures. To yoke together two such nations under a single state must lead to growing discontent and final destruction. The crowd roars. By the time the session ends, the All India Muslim League has passed what will be called the Lahore Resolution, vague in wording but clear in intent. The Muslims of India, especially in the northwest and east, should be grouped in independent states. The line has been crossed. The man who once pleaded for a democratic, united India now demands a separate homeland. Gandhi is horrified. Nehru scoffs. Many in Congress still believe this is a bargaining chip, a pressure tactic, a maximalist demand to be traded away at the conference table. The British, bogged down in World War II, see in Jinnah a useful counterweight to Congress. They are all underestimating how far he is willing to go and how little time he has left. Somewhere in these years, quietly, his body betrays him. The cough starts as an irritation, a minor inconvenience he dismisses as overwork. The weight loss he blames on his schedule. At last, in the privacy of a doctor's office, the verdict lands like a gavel: tuberculosis. In 1940s India, TB is often a slow death sentence. His doctors are shocked when he refuses prolonged rest. He demands only one promise: secrecy. If the British Congress or even his own colleagues know how sick he is, everything he is fighting for may slip from his grasp. So a new clock begins to tick, inaudible to the public, deafening to the few who know. He has to carve out a country before his lungs give in. World War II accelerates the drama. Congress, furious at not being fully consulted about India's entry into the war, resigns its ministries in 1939. Jinnah calls that day a day of deliverance, celebrating the fall of Congress governments that, in his telling, had oppressed Muslims. Now, for the first time, the League has a clear field in the provinces once ruled by Congress. They organize, recruit, fill the vacuum. The British, desperate for stability and troops, flirt with Jinnah, promising post-war concessions. Gandhi launches the Quit India movement in 1942, telling the British to leave India immediately. He and much of the Congress leadership are jailed. The streets erupt, then are crushed. For a time, the most visible, charismatic figures of Hindu-majority politics are behind bars. Jinnah walks free, meeting viceroys, drafting memoranda, giving interviews, consolidating his claim. Without the Muslim League, there can be no settlement. The rival he once accused of unleashing chaos is in prison. The man whose methods once seemed outdated now sits at the center of every British calculation about India's future. By 1945, as the war ends and a new Labour government in Britain signals it is finally ready to quit India, the stage is set for a decisive test. Elections are called. The Congress will measure its strength. The Muslim League will prove whether it truly represents Muslims or is merely Jinnah's fragile illusion. The results are staggering. Among Muslims in the seats reserved for them, the League wins an overwhelming majority. In province after province, Muslim voters choose Jinnah's party over regional rivals. Congress still dominates the general constituencies, but in the communal map the British themselves drew, a clear pattern emerges. Two giants facing each other across a subcontinent. From this point on, even the British cannot deny it. Jinnah is the sole spokesman of Muslim India. Gandhi's moral force remains immense. Nehru's vision of a secular, united India burns bright. But numbers, those unforgiving arbiters, have spoken. Any constitutional arrangement that ignores Jinnah's demands risks civil war. And yet, as negotiations begin in 1946, the cabinet mission plan, endless meetings in smoky rooms, late-night discussions in Delhi's bungalows, Jinnah is more alone than ever. He sleeps little, eats almost nothing, chain smokes through conferences that stretch for hours. Behind his composed exterior, his lungs burn. Fatima watches him cough blood into handkerchiefs, then folds them away before anyone else can see. The cabinet mission offers a plan, a united India, but with powerful groupings of provinces, Muslim majority regions together, Hindu majority regions together, tied in a loose federation. Jinnah, wary but pragmatic, accepts. For a moment, the possibility of a single complex India hangs in the air. Then Nehru, at a press conference, suggests that once the British leave, the Constituent Assembly will be free to change or ignore any safeguards. To Jinnah, this sounds like betrayal, proof that Congress will accept constraints only as long as British power enforces them and discard them the moment they can. The brittle trust shatters. Jinnah withdraws his acceptance. Talks falter. Mountbatten arrives as the last viceroy, all charm and speed, determined to wrap up the Indian problem quickly, conscious that London is impatient, the treasury empty, and the soldiers eager to go home. He pushes, cajoles, schemes. Jinnah digs in. If Muslims cannot have secure power within a united India, he tells the British, then they must have their own state. Pakistan is no longer a bargaining chip. It is the minimum demand. Violence begins to lick at the edges of politics. In August 1946, the League calls for Direct Action Day to demonstrate Muslim resolve. In Calcutta, the demonstration dissolves into 3 days of savage communal rioting. Hindus and Muslims butcher each other in the streets. The city that once symbolized British power now screams with the sound of knives and flames. The horror spreads. Bihar, Noakhali, the Punjab. Each massacre births a counter-massacre. old neighbors turn executioners. The fragile faith that Hindus and Muslims can live safely under one state shrivels, and behind it all, the private clock in Jinnah's chest ticks faster. He knows his time is running out, not just politically, but biologically. Every negotiation, every delay, every conference that drags into another week eats into the shrinking margin between his will and his failing body. When Mountbatten announces that power will be transferred not in June 1948, as originally planned, but in August 1947, nearly a year earlier, everyone is shocked. To Nehru and Congress, it feels dangerously rushed. To Gandhi, it feels like madness, leaving no time to heal the land. To Jinnah, it is both a terrifying risk and a brutal gift. The deadline he has been racing is suddenly moved forward. If he fails now, there will be no time for another round, another plan, another scheme. The British will leave and the map will harden without Pakistan, or with a Pakistan too weak, too mangled to survive. He accepts. He accepts partition, knowing it will slice through villages and hearts, that millions will flee, that blood will flow. He pushes for the largest possible Pakistan he can get, fighting over districts, canals, railway lines like a barrister arguing over the clauses of a will. By the summer of 1947, the once ostracized ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity stands inches away from absolute victory and irreversible catastrophe. He has outmaneuvered rivals, resurrected a dying party, turned a vague slogan into a concrete demand, and forced the world's greatest empire to redraw its maps. Now, as he boards a small plane bound for Karachi, the soon-to-be capital of the country he carved out of argument, blood, and willpower, at the price of that victory moves with him, silent and invisible in his own failing lungs. He steps off the plane in Karachi like a victor returning from the longest, bloodiest courtroom in history. But here is the cruel twist. The day Muhammad Ali Jinnah wins, he has already begun to lose. He has forced an empire to its knees, carved out a new country with words and will alone. But the state he has created exists mostly on paper, in speeches, in promises shouted by exhausted throats. On the ground, Pakistan is an idea standing on rubble. It is August 1947. The airfield is a blur of flags, flower garlands, and fevered faces. People climb onto trucks, hang from poles, cling to fences for a glimpse of him. They shout, "Quaid-e-Azam, long live Jinnah," until their voices crack. He stands straight, hat angled exactly so, suit uncreased despite the heat, that familiar mask of control fixed on his face. Cameras flash, guards fumble. Politicians push in, eager to be seen at his side. He lifts his hand in a brief salute. In that moment, to the hundreds of thousands who watch him, he is not just a man. He is deliverance. He is safety. He is the living proof that Muslims, long told they are a permanent minority, now have a country of their own. No one watching him guess that every breath he takes feels like it scrapes his lungs. No one sees the red flecks in his handkerchief, carefully folded away. The British had offered him a title years ago. Now the new state gives him something far weightier, a role that has never existed before. Governor General of Pakistan, head of state, founder, father, final court of appeal in almost every dispute that matters. The Indian flag goes up in Delhi. The green and white flag goes up in Karachi. Between the two cities, the land burns. Partition was drawn with ink on a map. The consequences arrive on trains. They roll into Pakistan stations at dawn, at midnight, under blazing afternoon skies. Black steel carriages groaning to a halt, doors creaking open not to reveal families with luggage and prayer mats, but silence. In carriage after carriage, bodies, men, women, children. Entire villages that tried to move together, cut down on the way. Blood dried on the wooden benches. Flies thick as smoke in the heat. Station masters stumble back. Railway workers gag. Soldiers shout instructions no one can follow. Somewhere someone screams, and then it spreads. A single sound rolling down the platform as people understand what they are seeing. In the new capital, reports pile up on Jinnah's desk like accusations. Lahore is half emptied. Villages in Punjab are burning. Columns of refugees, one eye on the horizon, one hand gripping bundles of cloth that hold everything left of their past lives, stretch for miles. Karachi's streets choke with makeshift tents, cooking fires, and hollow-eyed families staring at buildings that might as well be castles on the moon. In theory, Pakistan was born on August 14th. In reality, it is being carved day by day out of fear, loss, and frantic improvisation. Jinnah does not have the luxury of ceremony. Within hours of arrival, he is working, summoning officials, issuing orders, setting up ad hoc committees to deal with refugees, finance, tour defense. There is no proper government machinery yet. No central bank, no full civil service. Even the furniture for ministries has to be borrowed, bought, or built. Files are kept in trunks. Offices run out of rented houses and half-empty colonial buildings the British left behind like discarded shells. He sits at the center of it all, a thin man absorbing chaos, turning it, if not into order, then at least into direction. And then, in the middle of this storm, he stands up and says something no one expects. 3 days before formal independence, on August 11, 1947, the new Constituent Assembly of Pakistan meets for the first time. The hall in Karachi is hot, crowded, expectant. Muslim League politicians sit on green benches. British officials and foreign observers cluster at the back. Jinnah rises to speak as their unanimously elected president. People wait to hear the language they have heard for years. Muslim nation, Islamic state, homeland for the followers of Islam. They wait for a speech that tells them Pakistan will be a place where their religion rules. Instead, in precise measured English, he says, "You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques, or to any other place of worship. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state." The hall stills. He invokes the ghosts of Europe, Catholics and Protestants slaughtering each other for generations, only to end up in modern states where religion is no longer the basis of citizenship. He speaks of law, of equality, of the vision that in time, Hindus will cease to be Hindus and Muslims will cease to be Muslims, not in the religious sense, but in the political sense, as the citizens of one state. Some jaws tighten, some faces light up. Some of his closest allies exchange startled glances. Is this the same man who turned two nations into a rallying cry? Here is the twist. Yes. To Jinnah, there was never a contradiction. Pakistan, as he imagined it, was not a theocracy of mullahs and dogma. It was a fortress of political safety for Muslims, inside which the state itself would stand above religion. He has spent years demanding that Hindus and Muslims be treated as separate nations in constitutional terms. Now, having finally wrenched one nation out of the arrangement, he wants its citizens to be equal before the law, whether they pray in mosques or churches, temples, or not at all. Outside that hall, however, the country is tearing itself apart. Every day he spends crafting sentences about equality. Someone else bleeds on the road to Lahore or Amritsar. Every promise of tolerance must be enforced in a world where men with torches are hunting for an excuse not to listen. The rivalry he thought he had won with Gandhi and Congress did not end with Pakistan's birth. It just changed shape. In Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru stands before India's Constituent Assembly and speaks of a secular modern republic. The two men, once colleagues, then reluctant antagonists, now lead states that mirror and oppose each other in nearly every move. Jinnah claims Pakistan is the safer home for Muslims. Nehru insists Muslims are safe in India. Each must prove his version in the harsh laboratory of refugee camps and burning borders. Jinnah's time runs on two clocks. 1. The visible, brutal urgency of the present. Food to be found, shelters to be built, a war machine to be assembled almost from scratch. 2. The hidden, merciless clock of his disease. Only a handful of people know how bad it is. His doctors, his sister Fatima, a few aides. He works 17, 18 hours a day, then stumbles into a side room to lie down for 20 minutes between meetings. At night, he sits in a chair by an open window, coughing until his body shakes. The sea air of Karachi thick in his lungs. He has no intention of stopping. "If I take rest now," he is reported to have said, "rest assured, I will rest forever." He means it. Decisions that might have taken years of debate in a settled country now must be made in days. Where will the capital be? Karachi for now. What will the bureaucracy look like? He insists on a strong, disciplined civil service, giving stern lectures to young officers about honesty, duty, and the poison of corruption. He visits their training schools and tells them bluntly, "You are not rulers. You are servants of the people." Otro, what of the army? Pakistan inherits some units from the British Indian Army, but many officers and soldiers are still being transferred, trains of khaki, uniforms moving east and west. Equipment is short, ammunition is scarce, borders are unclear. And those borders are about to explode. The Radcliffe Line, the hastily drawn boundary between India and Pakistan, slices through Punjab and Bengal with little regard for history or geography. Cyril Radcliffe, the British lawyer who draws it, has never set foot in India before. He spends a few weeks with statistics, maps, and pressure from both sides, then delivers lines that will decide the fate of millions. Jinnah had fought for a larger Pakistan, angrily calling the version he got a mutilated, moth-eaten state. Now he has to make sure even this wounded Pakistan survives. In the mountains to the north, a crisis breaks that will tie Pakistan and India together in conflict for generations. Kashmir, a Muslim-majority princely state ruled by a Hindu Maharaja, nestled in the Himalayas like a jewel everyone wants. Geographically, economically, psychologically, it feels to Jinnah like the missing piece of Pakistan's map. He believes Kashmir should accede to Pakistan. Indian leaders believe it should join India, or at least be free to choose. The Maharaja hesitates, plays both sides, then, under pressure from an uprising and tribal incursions, signs an instrument of accession to India. Tribal fighters from Pakistan's northwest frontier had already poured into Kashmir, convinced they were helping liberate their Muslim brothers. The situation combusts into open war. Indian troops fly into Srinagar. Skirmishes, then battles, erupt in valleys and passes whose names most people in the plains had barely heard before. Jinnah rages. He orders the Pakistani military leadership, send troops, force the issue, move. But here is another bitter twist. Pakistan's army is still commanded at the top by British officers who fear that a full-scale war between the two newborn dominions will spiral out of control. They hesitate, stall, reinterpret. The chain of command bends his order until it delays, changes, evaporates. He realizes with a jolt he is the head of state, the father of the nation, and yet there are levers of power he cannot fully pull. Across the border, Nehru appeals to the United Nations, demanding that Pakistan withdraw support for the tribes. Ceasefire lines, resolutions, international observers. The dispute leaves the battlefield and enters the world's diplomatic bloodstream. While the world debates principles, people in Kashmir flee, fight, and die. Jinnah inwardly counts the cost. Every day spent freezing the front lines with words is another day Kashmir's fate drifts away from his control. Every hour spent in high politics is an hour he is not inspecting refugee camps or coaxing East Bengal's leaders to trust a central government seated thousands of kilometers away in Karachi. He is racing on all fronts. In Punjab and Sindh, refugee camps swell. Tents flap in hot winds. Children line up for rationed grain and water from tankers. Diseases lurk in stagnant puddles. Political speeches do not cure dysentery. He goes to the camps anyway. He moves slowly along the rows of people who lost everything to reach the country that exists because he argued for it. Old men with clouded eyes clutch his hands. Women wail. Some simply stare at him with a gaze that is more frightening than anger. Expectation. They do not know anything about constitutional safeguards or federal finance. They know only this: you promised us a home. This is it. Now what? He tells them again and again that they are citizens of Pakistan, that the state will care for them, that sacrifice will not be wasted. He means every word. He knows how inadequate they sound against hunger. Privately, late at night, he studies figures that look like verdicts. How many schools? How much land? How many civil servants willing to relocate from Delhi or Simla to Karachi? How long until the Reserve Bank of India releases Pakistan's share of financial assets, which Indian leaders are in no rush to hand over? The rivalry with Congress is now fought not in speeches about the future, but in wrangles over cash, canals, and files. Water from the Indus and its tributaries runs from headworks often located on Indian territory into Pakistani fields. Technocrats argue about agreements. Farmers fear India will simply turn off the tap. For a new state whose breadbasket lies in Punjab, the idea of dry canals feels like a death sentence. Jinnah leans on his ministers, his negotiators, his dwindling time. He knows that if Pakistan fails in these first years, if it starves, splinters, or collapses under its own contradictions, history will not be kind enough to blame only colonial maps or Hindu majorities. It will blame him. That knowledge drives him harder than any slogan. In 1948, he travels to what is now East Pakistan, present-day Bangladesh, for the first time since independence. Dhaka's streets are lined with crowds. Here, on the opposite wing of the country, separated by over 1,000 miles of Indian territory, he faces a different worry. Bengali Muslims turned out in massive numbers for the Muslim League. They believed in Pakistan not as an abstract concept, but as salvation from Hindu landlord power, from discrimination, from poverty. Now they want to know, will this Pakistan be theirs too, or will it be ruled forever by Urdu-speaking elites from the West? At Dhaka University, he makes another speech that will echo down years, though not in the way he hopes. He insists that Urdu, and only Urdu, will be the national language of Pakistan. He thinks in terms of unity, of a single administrative language that can bind together Punjab, Sindh, the frontier, and Bengal. But to many Bengalis standing in that hall, it sounds like erasure. You asked us to die for Pakistan, they think. Now you will not even let us speak in our own tongue? Applause comes, but it is thinner, more formal. A seed of resentment is planted that Jinnah, with his failing health and crushing responsibilities, will never fully recognize. Here is another twist of the knife history holds. The man who bled his career dry to protect a minority's rights across India now unintentionally ignites fears of marginalization among the largest group inside his own country. He does not mean to. He simply has no time, no energy, no spare attention left over to see how language and province will one day tear at the country he welded together. Back in Karachi, his world shrinks physically even as his responsibilities grow. He moves between the Governor General's house, cabinet meetings, and his desk, where files stack higher than ever. He berates ministers for corruption and laziness. When businessmen come seeking favors, he cuts them short with a look that makes even seasoned elites stammer. You will have to put in hard work, he tells the nation in broadcast after broadcast. There is no magic wand. He means himself, too. His doctors beg him to rest, to go to the hills, to at least reduce his hours. He waves them away with the same impatience he uses on junior officials. Do you want me to go away? He asks one. Who will do my work then? The truth is, he has not trained a successor. He does not fully trust anyone else to hold all the threads he has knotted in his own hands. Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan is loyal, capable, but even he cannot match Jinnah's authority, his almost mystical status in the country, so Jinnah keeps every decision as close as possible. He is a constitutionalist by instinct, but in practice, in these emergency years, Pakistan is run like a barrister's case still under his personal argument. Cabinet ministers defer. Civil servants wait for signals. Ordinary citizens watch radio announcements as if they were court verdicts. What happens when the advocate steps out of the courtroom? By mid-1948, his body begins to answer. The coughing fits are worse. He loses more weight. Photographs from this time show a man almost spectral, cheekbones sharp as knives, eyes sunken, yet still in that immaculate suit, still upright, still refusing to let his fragility leak into the public gaze. On Independence Day 1948, he rides in an open car through Karachi. The crowds cheer as they did a year before, but some eyes widen at how gaunt he looks. The sun beats down. He lifts his hand in a weary salute. Around him, banners proclaim the glory of Pakistan, the unity of its provinces, the strength of its resolve. Under the surface, tensions simmer, but for now his presence holds the center. He barely makes it through the ceremonial events. Soon after, he allows himself to be persuaded, partly by doctors, partly by Fatima, to leave the suffocating, humid sea air of Karachi for the cooler climate of Ziyarat, a hill station in Balochistan. The official story, he is going to rest and recover. The private truth, this is a race between the mountain air and the disease chewing through his lungs. In Ziyarat, pine trees whisper in the wind outside the simple bungalow. Inside, the man who once strode the corridors of imperial power, who stared down viceroys and prime ministers, lies under blankets, his breathing shallow, his frame almost disappearing into the bed. Yet he still asks for files. Ministers bring documents up the winding roads. Telegrams arrive. He dictates replies in a thin voice, stopping every few sentences to catch his breath. He insists on being informed about Kashmir, about the refugee situation, about the economy. Fatima sits by his side, fiercely protective, watching the man who has always seemed made of steel fade before her eyes. He knows now with cold clarity that he will not see the constitution he wanted enacted. He will not see Kashmir resolved. He will not see his warnings about corruption and feudalism fully heeded or fully betrayed. But he also knows this. In just over a year, he has done what most men fail to do in a lifetime of easier circumstances. He took a moth-eaten state and kept it alive through fire. Outside, Pakistan stumbles forward. A cabinet meeting here, a provincial crisis there. The ordinary business of a state trying to find its rhythm. Across the border, Nehru delivers speeches to India's parliament, shaping another vision, another path. The two rivals, who once sparred in drawing rooms and assemblies, now duel through their legacies rather than directly. In the hills of Balochistan, the clock that has been ticking quietly inside Muhammad Ali Jinnah since before Pakistan was born grows louder. Every cough is a reminder. Every pause between words stretches longer. He has raced history and, in one sense, outrun it. He carved out a homeland before his body failed. But history does not stop when one man reaches his finish line. Lying there in the dim light of the bungalow, listening to sparse reports about the sprawling country below, he knows that the next chapter of Pakistan's story will be written without his guiding hand. The question that has haunted him for years now turns, for the first time, into something he can no longer try to answer himself. Without the iron will of the man who created it, what happens to the country that bears his fingerprints on every law, every border, every hope? The answer comes faster than anyone expects. One morning in Ziyarat, when the pine trees outside look almost black against the rising sun, Muhammad Ali Jinnah tries to sit up in bed and cannot. For a second, he is just a man in a room, startled by his own weakness. Then the meaning hits him like a physical blow. The body that dragged an empire to the negotiating table can no longer lift itself from a pillow. Doctors crowd the room. Oxygen cylinders hiss. Fatima grips the bedrail so hard her knuckles turn white. The governor of Balochistan sends frantic telegrams to Karachi. They all know the truth they do not say aloud. If he dies here, in a remote hill station, far from the capital, from the people who chant his name, it will feel as if Pakistan's heart has stopped in the dark, unseen. They decide to move him. The plan is brutal in its simplicity. Get him down the mountains alive. They bundle him in blankets, his frame shockingly light under the layers. As they carry him out, the cold air slaps his face. For a moment, he opens his eyes and looks at the hills. He has always liked heights. Balconies over city squares, high windows in courtrooms filled with murmuring voices. Now, looking out over the ridges, there is no crowd, no judge, no opponent. Only wind and silence. He is lowered into a military aircraft. The engines roar. Ziyarat falls away beneath them. Inside the plane, his chest rises and falls in ragged waves. Fatima watches the altimeter needle creep down as they descend toward Karachi. Every 1,000 feet feels like a verdict deferred. On the ground, arrangements are being made as if for a visiting head of state, not a dying one. An ambulance, a motorcade, police cordons. Karachi, unaware, goes about its day, the sprawling, chaotic capital of a country still inventing itself. The plane lands. They slide him out, his face gray, his lips moving around words no one can hear in the engine noise. The ambulance doors slam. Sirens tear at the air. And then, another twist, absurd, almost cruel in its symbolism. On the way from the airfield, the ambulance breaks down. It simply coughs, shudders, and dies on the side of the road, as if the fragile new machinery of Pakistan cannot quite carry the weight of the man who created it. There is no backup vehicle, no polished contingency plan. This is still a poor state, a raw state, a place where everything is improvisation. The Governor-General of Pakistan lies gasping in the back of a stranded van, the afternoon heat turning the interior into an oven. Minutes stretch, 10, 20. Cars slow as they pass. Some drivers recognize him through the dusty windows. Incredulous faces press closer. Word runs like electricity through the gathered crowd. Quaid-e-Azam, here, in a broken ambulance. People surge forward, some trying to fan air through the little hatch, others shouting at each other, at the police, at God. Somewhere in the chaos, a mechanic is summoned, another vehicle procured. By the time the convoy jerks back into motion, an hour has disappeared. An hour in which the founder of Pakistan lay stranded within sight of his own city, as helpless as the anonymous refugees he used to visit in their tents. Later, people will argue, did that wasted hour kill him? Or was it already decided in the shadows of Ziyarat? No one can say for certain. What they can say is this. By the evening of September 11, 1948, Muhammad Ali Jinnah is dead. In the Governor-General's house, a sheet is drawn over his face. The room fills with a sound that has followed him for decades. now twisted into raw grief, people calling his name. For one long suspended moment, Pakistan has no father. The news flows through Karachi like floodwater. Men who once swore they would never weep in public cry openly in the streets. Women beat their chests, tear their scarves. In mosques, imams break their prepared sermons and speak instead about the man who spent his life arguing, not preaching, yet ended up hailed as a savior. Radio Pakistan interrupts its programming with a trembling announcement. In Delhi, Indian leaders fall silent as the word reaches them. Jawaharlal Nehru, the rival whose speeches shared so many stages and so much history with Jinnah's, hears that the man across the border, the architect of the two-nation theory, is gone. Reports say Nehru is shaken. It is as if a chapter they were writing together in anger and argument has slammed shut mid-sentence. The funeral is vast, disordered, elemental. Karachi's streets heave with people, a human river surging toward the place where his body will be carried. Officialdom tries to keep things dignified, lines of soldiers, ranks of ministers, but the public grief swallows protocol whole. Men climb trees, lampposts, balconies, trying to see the casket as it passes. Some faint in the crush. Others reach just for a second to touch the cloth, to feel that this is real, this is happening, that the thin man who once seemed carved from ice is really gone. An imam recites the funeral prayer. The voice rises and falls over a city that, a few years ago, did not even know it would be part of a country called Pakistan. He is buried on a bare patch of land that, in time, will become a marble mausoleum, a national icon. For now, it is just soil. Dust clings to men's hands as they lower him down. The last shovel of earth falls. Above ground, the real scramble begins. Because the second Jinnah's body returns to the earth, his image is seized by those who remains. Quaid-e-Azam Khan, his trusted lieutenant, becomes Pakistan's second prime minister and, in practice, its most powerful man. The Governor-General's office is filled, the cabinet reshuffled, files redistributed. But there is something missing from every room: authority. Jinnah's authority had been a strange, almost alchemical thing, part legal expertise, part iron discipline, part the awe of a people who saw in him the proof that they were not doomed to be ruled forever. Now, suddenly, nobody can simply say, "This is what Quaid-e-Azam wants," and end the argument. Everyone wants to claim what he would have wanted instead. Within months, his August 11th speech, those carefully weighed words about religious freedom, about the separation of personal faith and the business of the state, turns from a promise into a battlefield. Some leaders hold it up like a shield. They say, look, this is Jinnah's Pakistan, a place where everyone is equal before the law, where Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Parsis are as much citizens as Muslims, where the state does not force belief. Others quote different lines from different days, different moods. They say, no, Pakistan was made in the name of Islam. It is a fortress of faith. Its laws must reflect that, must be anchored openly in the Quran and Sunnah. To dilute that is to betray the man in the grave. He is not there to say which reading is right. His photograph, the familiar profile in cap and sherwani, appears on the walls of government offices, in classrooms, in shops. His face, which once glared across courtrooms and negotiating tables, now glares down from frames, while below, arguments over his intentions grow more bitter. Outside, history refuses to slow down out of respect for the dead. Refugees still huddle in camps. Villages on the new border with India are still uneasy, still tense. In Kashmir, the ceasefire line has frozen a conflict, not solved it. Nehru sits in India's parliament, rolling out land reforms, planning big dams, talking about democracy and socialism. He has a functioning constitution to write. In Pakistan, the constitution is still a ghost. Quaid and his colleagues work on objectives, resolutions, and committees, trying to pin down in legal language what this country is meant to be. Islamic, democratic, federal, centralized, all of the above? Outside the assembly, something far more dangerous than legal confusion is taking root. A habit of looking up and not quite finding anyone who can say no. Jinnah could browbeat ministers and generals into line by sheer force of will. No one after him has quite the same power. Provincial leaders begin to bristle. Bureaucrats learn that files can be delayed, nudged, massaged. Politicians discover the intoxicating thrill of backroom intrigue without the steadying fear of his disapproval, and then, barely 3 years after Jinnah's death, the new Pakistan receives another shock. In 1951, Liaquat Ali Khan stands before a crowd in Rawalpindi, speaking at a public meeting in a park that will later bear his name. He talks about policy, about opportunity, about the future. A man in the crowd raises a pistol. 2 shots. Liaquat staggers, falls. "God save Pakistan," he is said to have murmured as he lay dying. The crowd surges, and within minutes the assassin is beaten to death on the spot. Father of the nation, first prime minister. In 3 years, both gone to the grave. Behind the scenes, something shifts permanently. The civil service and the military, those neat, uniformed, self-confident institutions Jinnah had lectured so sternly about duty and restraint, begin to sense their opportunity. These politicians, they tell themselves, these squabbling, fragile men in Sherwanis, they do not know how to run a country. We do. In India, Nehru's hand stays firm on the tiller. Years earlier, in smoky drawing rooms, the two men had argued over centralization, democracy, the pace of reform. Now Nehru has the one thing Jinnah's Pakistan does not: time. He leads India for 17 continuous years. In those same 17 years, Pakistan will cycle through constitutions, assemblies, coups. The rivalry that had once been personal, 2 towering men vying over the fate of subcontinental Muslims, mutates into something colder, harder. It becomes a rivalry between systems. On one side, a flawed but continuous parliamentary democracy. On the other, a state that cannot decide who truly holds power, the people, their representatives, or the uniformed guardians watching from the side. There are other warning signs, too, flashing in places Jinnah barely had time to visit. In Dhaka, the language question he mishandled returns like a storm. In February 1952, students in East Pakistan protest, demanding recognition of Bangla as a state language alongside Urdu. They march unarmed, chanting slogans about identity, respect, equality. Police open fire. Bodies fall on the streets of Dhaka. Blood darkens the dust. Mothers wail over sons who had gone out only with notebook and pen. For those students, for their families, the shots sound like a final answer to a question Jinnah once posed in a university hall. Will you accept Urdu alone? They do not. Every bullet plants a deeper resentment, that the Pakistan they helped create treats them as lesser, as outsiders in their own land. Jinnah's unseen time limit, the narrow window in which his personal authority could have soothed, balanced, negotiated these tensions, is long gone. His portrait still hangs in government buildings in Dhaka. It looks down on speeches, on ceremonies. But the wires connecting that face to living power have been cut. As years pass, Pakistan's politicians bicker. Military men grow restive. Finally, in 1958, General Ayub Khan steps forward and does what Jinnah never allowed any general to do while he lived. He takes power, martial law, parliament dissolved. And the justification always is wrapped in the language Jinnah himself once used about discipline, order, reform. We are saving the country, the generals say, saving Jinnah's Pakistan from the politicians. But every time a uniform replaces an elected representative, another piece of Jinnah's constitutional dream crumbles. The barrister who believed in due process has left behind a state that reaches again and again for shortcuts. Across the border, Nehru watches, frowns, and quietly rejoices. Every coup in Pakistan is an unspoken argument in India's favor. Look, Nehru can say to his critics, to the world, they chose the path of religion and military guardianship. We chose the path of secular democracy. See which works. The rivalry, once about who could win over their shared people, is now about whose choices will survive history's harsh weather. It is not a fair fight. Jinnah is no longer there to answer back. His words are. In the 1960s, the 2 states that carry the weight of these dead men's visions clash again in open war. The 1965 conflict over Kashmir rages in the valleys Jinnah once watched anxiously in maps and briefings. Radio Pakistan blasts triumphant marches. India's All India radio counters with its own songs of heroism. On both sides, children fall asleep to blackout drills and stories of brave soldiers. Nehru is gone by then too, but the contest he and Jinnah set in motion has its own momentum. In Pakistan, battered but defiant, the generals step onto balconies and wave like conquering heroes. It feels, for a moment, as if military rule has been vindicated. Until in 1971, the bill comes due. In East Pakistan, decades of neglect, cultural slight, and political dismissal boil over. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, speaking in a Bengali that Jinnah never bothered to learn, becomes the voice of a people who feel colonized by their supposed brothers. Elections are held. Mujib's party wins a sweeping mandate. Under any constitutional system Jinnah would have respected, that should have meant power. Instead, West Pakistani elites balk. Negotiations stutter. The army moves. What follows is a nightmare Jinnah never wanted and never imagined. A civil war in the very homeland he carved out to avoid Muslim disempowerment. Pakistani soldiers and Bengali civilians facing each other in streets, in villages, in fields. In December 1971, after a brutal campaign and Indian military intervention, East Pakistan breaks away. A new flag rises over Dhaka. A new country is born, Bangladesh. The Pakistan Jinnah drew on maps, defended in speeches, rushed into existence against impossible odds, is sliced in half. The nation that was meant to be a permanent refuge for all Indian Muslims proves within a generation that it cannot even hold itself together. In New Delhi, India's Prime Minister, now Indira Gandhi, Nehru's daughter, speaks triumphantly. Today we have sunk Jinnah's two-nation theory in the Bay of Bengal, she declares. It is a knife driven straight at the dead man's idea. And yet, even in this darkest twist, the story refuses to be simple. Because if the breakup of Pakistan undermines Jinnah's belief in one united Muslim political force, the very existence of Bangladesh also proves something he always insisted on, that Muslims, like any other community, have the right to demand political arrangements that reflect who they are, what they suffer, what they dream. They do not always agree, they do not always stay united, but they refuse to remain voiceless. Back in what is left of Pakistan, leaders scramble once more to invoke Jinnah. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, eloquent, theatrical, secular in lifestyle but clever in religious symbolism, promises to rebuild, to give democracy a second birth. He stands at podiums under huge portraits of the Quaid, promising Islamic socialism, justice, a new constitution. In 1973, that constitution is passed. It blends parliamentary democracy with a stronger Islamic identity than Jinnah ever spelled out. It names the country the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. His August 11th vision is not erased, but it is no longer the whole story. Then, yet again, the generals return. General Zia-ul-Haq topples Bhutto in a coup. Bhutto is later executed after a controversial trial. Posters of Jinnah look down from courtroom walls as the hangman's noose tightens around the neck of an elected prime minister. Zia drapes his rule in Islam, hudud ordinances, public floggings, headscarves, beards. The state speaks more and more in the language of piety and punishment. In this Pakistan, Jinnah's carefully measured, almost clinical references to Islam sound strangely mild. Still, every side claims him. Secularists wave transcripts of his speeches, point to his English suits, his marriage to a Parsi woman, his fondness for whiskey before illness forced him to quit. Islamists point to his calls for an Islamic homeland, his insistence that Muslims needed a state of their own to live by their values. He cannot answer either camp. He lies under white marble in Karachi, in a tomb lit by chandeliers, visited by schoolchildren who shuffle past in socks, craning their necks to look up at the great empty space above his sarcophagus. Outside the mausoleum, buses roar, horns blare, street vendors shout. Somewhere in the crush, a child holds a worn schoolbook with his image on the cover and wonders, in the vague way children do, who this sharp-faced man in the cap really was. That question, that wondering, may be Jinnah's most enduring afterlife. Because every crisis Pakistan faces, even decades later, drags his ghost back into the debate. When extremists attack minorities, someone quotes his promise, "You are free to go to your temples, your mosques, or any other place of worship." When politicians rig elections or generals plot coups, someone else quotes his warning to civil servants, "You are not rulers, you are servants of the people." When a new constitution is proposed, when a judge makes a daring ruling, when a student on a campus in Lahore or Karachi or Dhaka argues about history, his name surfaces like a touchstone. Would Jinnah have wanted this? It becomes the country's favorite unanswerable question, the invisible hourglass in every argument, a deadline he left behind without knowing it. You must decide what Pakistan is before his memory hardens entirely into myth. Across the border in India, his image is no less contested. For decades, textbooks painted him as a villain, the man who split Mother India, who sowed division. Then, as politics shift, some begin to see him as a cautionary tale instead. proof of what happens when a minority feels cornered, unheard, threatened. In Indian television studios, politicians argue about secularism, about the treatment of Muslims, about rising majoritarianism. Jinnah's name, once used as a curse, sometimes appears as a warning. Do you want to create another Jinnah? In that way, the rivalry he once lived in with Gandhi, with Nehru, with the Indian National Congress does not really end with his death. It mutates. Their statues, their photographs, their quotes, their myths stand like four cardinals at the corners of the subcontinent's compass. Every time the region veers more towards inclusion or exclusion, towards democracy or authoritarianism, towards coexistence or persecution, and the legacy of each man is pulled out, weighed, invoked. Jinnah's clock stopped in 1948, but the time he bought, in blood, in sweat, in endless argument, for the people he spoke for keeps running. For some, Pakistan is proof that he succeeded. A nuclear-armed state, one of the world's largest Muslim populations, a vibrant, if chaotic, society that refuses to bow even under pressure. For others, it is proof that he failed. Coups, sectarian violence, inequality, a homeland that did not feel like home to Bengalis, Ahmadis, Hindus, Christians, Shia. The truth, as always with him, sits in a tense, uncomfortable middle. He did what he set out to do. He forced the world to admit that Muslims of the subcontinent were a political nation, not a mere numeric minority. He carved out a space where they would, in theory, never be outvoted into silence again. But he could not finish the next step, building a state that knew exactly how to protect both their faith and their freedoms. That task he left to those who came after, to prime ministers and dictators, to judges and generals, to activists and poets, to the millions of ordinary citizens who, every election, every protest, every quiet act of kindness or cruelty, decide what Pakistan is. At Ziyarat, in that dim bungalow in the hills, he once lay awake, listening to his own ragged breathing, wondering if the country would survive without him. Decades later, the answer is as stark and complex as the man himself. It did survive. The question that remains is more unsettling, more urgent, and it hangs over every classroom where his portrait looks down, every crowded street that bears his name, every fragile hope whispered over a newborn in Karachi or Lahore or Dhaka. Can it still become what he thought he was racing time to build? And how long does Pakistan have left to decide which Muhammad Ali Jinnah it will remember, the cold strategist of separation, or the frail, coughing man who, in his final year, told a roaring new nation that the true measure of its greatness would be how it treated those who did not look, pray, or think like its majority?